Franz Mehring, On the Philosophy of Capitalism, Nietzsche, 1891. Nietzsche is not, as Mr. Lindau's North and South would have us believe, the social philosopher of the aristocracy, but rather the social philosopher of capitalism. It is one of the most significant phenomena in German history that the working classes, but unfortunately not the bourgeois classes, have managed to preserve their intellectual connection with the classical age of German education. While this education found its highest, most comprehensive expression in Hegel's philosophy, its revolutionary elements found their clearest development in Lassalle and, even more sharply, in Engels and Marx, while the conservative elements of the same philosophy could not find an equal education, and in any case did not find one. The year 1848 was the fall from grace that opened the eyes of the ruling classes to the downside of the Prussian state religion, which the misunderstanding of the sentence, everything that is real is rational, and everything that is rational is real, had made of Hegel's philosophy in the 1830s and 1840s. It was cast aside as obsolete, regardless of whether this would perhaps only make its revolutionary backlash all the more severe, and people threw themselves into the arms of Schopenhauer, who, as the philosopher of the pension-receiving petty bourgeoisie that wanted peace and quiet, had waged a 30-year war of abuse against Hegel and, in the timid and cat-miserable mood that had gripped the bourgeois classes after 1848, finally found the long-awaited understanding of his timid and miserable, though at times quite amusing philosophy. But Nietzsche grew up on Schopenhauer, a faithful disciple both in his ranting against Hegel and in his bourgeois class consciousness, except that, in keeping with the progress of the times, he no longer crowned the petty bourgeoisie with laurels, but rather exploitative big capital. It is now perfectly true. In his work, Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche makes a certain return to Hegel. In it, he speaks not only of Schopenhauer's unintelligent rage against Hegel, which led to the entire last generation of Germans out of the context of German culture, but the title and content of this work also echo Hegel's words in many ways. One believes one is saying something very great when one says, man is good by nature, but one forgets that one is saying something far greater when one says, man is evil by nature. And Nietzsche, without quoting Hegel, elaborates at length on Hegel's idea that it is precisely the evil passions of man, such as greed and lust for power, that become the levers of historical development. He acts as if he has made a discovery never before made in this immense, almost new realm of dangerous knowledge, and it is difficult to maintain the necessary philosophical seriousness when he links the solemn statement of a sentence that has become commonplace since Hegel to the apostrophe, once you have been blown here with your ship, well then. Come on, now grit your teeth, open your eyes. Keep your hand firmly on the wheel. We are sailing straight past morality. We are crushing, perhaps even destroying our own remaining morality by venturing there, but what does it matter to us? Not much, if we engage in such philosophical capers about things that we either cannot understand or do not want to understand. For that evil, in which Hegel saw the driving force of historical development has, according to his dialectical method with its conservative and revolutionary sides, a second meaning. By this he also means that every new advance appears as a sacrilege against something sacred, as a rebellion against the old, dying conditions that have been sanctified by habit. Because Nietzsche could not or would not think Hegel's idea through to its conclusion, he calls the French Revolution, of which Hegel always spoke with great enthusiasm, a gruesome and, judged from close up, superfluous farce, and rails against the revolutionary thinkers who first made Hegel's dialectical method fruitful by transferring it from the realm of the unfindable, absolute spirit, to the realm of economic conditions, as a very narrow, captive, chained kind of spirit, which wants roughly the opposite of what lies in our intentions and instincts, presumably. Falsely called free spirits, eloquent and prolific slaves of democratic taste, unfree and laughably superficial, especially with their fundamental tendency to see the forms of the old society as the cause of all human misery and misfortune, whereby the truth is happily turned upside down. It belongs to the same series of tragicomic somersaults that make up Nietzsche's philosophy when he feuds with Christianity, not because of the abuse of ecclesiastical forms for worldly purposes of greed and lust for power, which is, for him, the only true purpose of religion, but because of the herd animal morality, with which Christianity has presented charity as the highest human virtue. Hegel's dialectical method destroyed all fixed concepts. Its conservative character consisted in recognizing the legitimacy of certain stages of knowledge and society depending on time and circumstances, but its revolutionary character understood historical development as an uninterrupted process of becoming and passing away, in which, despite all apparent coincidences and temporary setbacks, a progressive development from the lower to the higher takes place. It therefore knew as little of a definitive and perfect morality as it did of a definitive and perfect state. Morality was for it merely the product of the historical spirit, and the concepts of good and evil were not absolute but relative. But Hegel did know one absolute, namely, the absolute spirit of his system, the secret and invisible leader of his world historical process of becoming and passing away, through which he blocked the consequences of his method of thinking. These consequences were first drawn by Engels and Marx, who rejected the absolute spirit, and found that real things are not the images of our concepts, but rather that our concepts are only the images of real things. In other words, that people must first eat, drink, and live before they can think and write poetry. With this, just as absolute truths disappear from philosophy, politics, etc., so too do the precepts of morality that are valid for all peoples and all times. There is no longer any absolutely valid moral theory, but only relative moral systems, which vary greatly depending on the economic conditions of the individual peoples and classes. A difference that, incidentally, in such fierce class struggles as those that prevail today, can be seen every day in the most remarkable examples of class morality. Relativity of morality, which is already present in Hegel's work, Nietzsche does not conclude, like Engels and Marx, that morality is historically conditioned, but rather that all morality is unconditionally meaningless. He arrives at this conclusion through his one-sided view of evil, which, according to Hegel, is the driving force of historical development. He sees only envy, hatred, greed, and lust for power as life-giving emotions, the fundamental and essential, in the overall economy of history, and if these emotions are called evil, it is only due to the mob-like hostility toward everything privileged and self-important, as it is an unabashed self-aggrandizement of the herd animal, that is man, the comfortable characteristics, compassion, self-sacrifice, devotion, etc. Nietzsche is also aware of class struggle and the corresponding master and slave morality, but he does not see it as a dialectical process of world history in which a development from the lower to the higher takes place, but as an unshakable and immutable law of nature. In this struggle, the rulers and oppressors, the free spirits, always have the power and therefore also the right, while the ruled and oppressed, the herd animals, are always condemned to powerlessness and therefore also to injustice. For Nietzsche, the only real morality is the doctrine of power relations from which historical life arises. To have smuggled the moral concepts of good and evil into this morality is only a mischievous prank, through which the herd animal seeks revenge on the free spirits, and through which it has, of course, instigated terrible mischief in history. See, for example, Christianity. But the times of delusion are fading away, and the philosophers of the future are coming up, the free, the very free, the refined, and noble spirits. They stand beyond good and evil.